to welcome you to this edition of Maven Monologues, and we are looking forward to hearing about your perspective on life, work, and culture within within Israel as a Jewish high-tech Maven. What's the secret to your success, Eric? Tell us all about it.
All right. Well, thank you, Rabbi. Thank you for everyone joining. I'll speak today for about 20 minutes or so and go through, like Rabbi said, my career path to Israel, a little bit about Playtika, what life and business are like in Israel, and then some of my thoughts around Judaism and the diaspora that have been formed since I moved there. And then if you guys have any questions, obviously feel free to ask. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm 30 years old. I was born and raised in Montreal. My parents are Stephen and Wendy Raps, in case you know them from the congregation. And I grew up in TMR. I went to Jewish day school. I went to Solomon Schechter in Bialik. And I grew up with strong Jewish values and a strong Jewish identity. And I was taught to support Israel, but I didn't really have a personal connection to Israel beyond just being Jewish and being taught to support it. We had no family in Israel. Before I moved, I didn't have any friends there. And I never really vacationed there. So I didn't experience it firsthand ever. But my path to Israel started when I was in university. And it had nothing to do with my studies, actually. I had started a business, a mobile games company, which is what I still work in today, in my second year of university at McGill. And at the time that I was running that, I had also gotten admitted to law school at McGill, which was very exciting. Both of my older brothers had gone to law school at McGill. They were both lawyers. And so I thought I was going to be on that path as well. But it turns out my heart just wasn't in it. I had raised about $500,000 to go and start this business. At the time that basically my first semester started, I went to 2 classes. One was the wrong class. And after that, I decided to drop out and just focus full-time on my business. And so in the process of commercializing that business, I met another Jewish Montrealer, a very successful businessman, some of you may know, named Mitch Garber. And Mitch at the time was the CEO of a company called Caesars Interactive Entertainment. And Caesars Interactive was basically the online or the subsidiary of Caesars, the one you know in Vegas, that was responsible for all the online initiatives of the company. And so they formed the business in 2008, 2009, and the idea was that they were going to do real money, federally regulated online poker in the US. So in 2006, online gambling in the US was made illegal, and Caesars, with Mitch at the helm and the backing of TPG and Apollo, who are 2 very large private equity firms in the States, they own Caesars, they were going to go and try and push for a bill to do this. And so after 2 years of trying to get it passed, they realized it wasn't going to happen. It got rolled out on a state-by-state basis. And they basically ended up in this position where they had amazing assets because they had the Caesars brand. They owned the World Series of Poker, so they had that brand. They had a very talented executive team, and then they had the capital and backing of Apollo and TPG, but they really had no business. They had online gambling in New Jersey and Nevada, and they owned the World Series of Poker, which wasn't so attractive. And so they started to look for other businesses that sort of were thematic with Caesars itself. And they came across at the time what was a new market of freemium games or virtual currency games on Facebook. So this is around 2010. And I don't know if any of you play these games. Some of you have probably played Candy Crush. Candy Crush is a competitor of ours. So they had we did Playtika. We had a slots game where you play slots as you would in a casino, but it's all virtual currency, no real money whatsoever. And the game was growing very, very rapidly. And they decided to go and buy the company. They bought it only a year after it was founded. And jumping ahead a little bit, it ended up being the best deal, best acquisition anyone at the company had ever made before. And so when I was running my business and they had bought this business and they were on this tremendous growth trajectory, I had wanted to go and work for them and find a way for them to invest in me or, at a minimum, find a way to collaborate. And so over the 2 years that I was running the business, we had built a bit of a relationship with the Caesars team and Mitch. And ultimately, after 2 years, I realized that I was going to need a lot more capital to scale my business. I was going to need about $15 to $20 million. I didn't think I would be able to raise it. And so I shut the business down. And at that point, I was 23, which I know isn't old or anything, but I was 23. I had no business, and I dropped out of law school. So things were looking a little glim for a little bit of time. And I reached out to Mitch and basically said, I want to work for you. And at that point, he wasn't responsive anymore, or as responsive. So I messaged him a few times over several weeks. I called him over several weeks, and no answer. And finally, I just sort of said, and I don't know what compelled me to want to work there so much, but I was basically just of the view that if he's going to say no, he's going to say no to my face. And so I said, I'm going to go to his office. I'll surprise him, take him by the element of surprise and just try and force my way in there. And so I went to his office, which I'd been to many times in the past, but every time I had gone, it was in the normal course of the day. And in order to sort of have that element of surprise, I decided I would go at about 6 a.m. because there's no way he'd be in the office before then. And little did I know that the doors weren't open. So it's February, minus 30 degrees, and I'm locked outside at 6 in the morning in a suit. And so I waited for 2 hours. Finally, someone came. I lied to them and convinced them that I had a meeting with Mitch and I was here a little bit early. He let me upstairs. And then I met Mitch. We spoke for about half an hour, 45 minutes. And he said, if I send you to Vegas, because we had an office in Vegas, if I send you there for 6 months and you work on the World Series of Poker, is that something interesting to you? And I said, absolutely. I could leave tomorrow. And I did that. I packed up. I moved to Vegas for 6 months. And little by little, I just started to climb the ranks in the company. I worked on, one initiative, then two initiatives, then played a greater role in those initiatives. And after about 6 months, I moved back to Montreal. I worked very closely with Mitch. I was sort of his chief of staff or executive associate. I worked on, obviously, things related to our business, but also some of the things that he works on outside of the company, worked on in the past. And in 2016, we sold Playtika to a Chinese private equity consortium for $4.4 billion. And I was one of three people who were basically instrumental in the deal. It was obviously there's more than just three people doing a deal, but we were sort of the three at the center of it. It was our president and CFO and our general counsel. And the three of us still work together very, very closely to this day. And the way that Playtika was set up at the time, and it's still the case, was basically the Israelis operated the company. So this is an Israeli business. It has offices in more locations, and I'll get to that in a bit. But they operated the day-to-day. They were responsible for all the revenue generation, all the marketing, things like that. And we at Caesars were responsible for all the corporate functions. So, corporate strategy, M&A, talking to investors, all that kind of stuff. And so once we sold the business, if we didn't find a way to get us from Caesars to come over, there would have been a vacuum at the company where that function didn't exist. And importantly, Playtika is a very acquisitive company. We buy at least one business a year. And so we needed that capability. So myself, our president and CFO, and our general counsel were asked to join Playtika, leave Caesars, join them. And one of us had to move to Israel to be close to our CEO and the company's headquarters. And the other two gentlemen I worked with are older. They have kids, they're American. They're not moving to Israel. I was 26 and single, and I said, why not? So that was effectively my path to Israel. I moved there in March of 2017. I've been there since, though at the moment I'm in Miami. And that's effectively how I got there. Now, the way I looked at the decision to move there was probably a little bit more unconventional than the way most people look at moving to Israel specifically. So I would say a lot of people move to Israel because they're spiritual, they're Zionists, there's some sort of element of that. And for me, to be frank, it was strictly a business decision. It was a business opportunity, and I wanted to take advantage of it. Now, maybe subconsciously, my comfort level with the idea of moving to Israel was greater than I appreciated because I was born Jewish, I was raised Jewish, so there was some comfort there. But consciously, I looked at it the same way people choose to move to New York or London or San Francisco for work. I looked at Israel as that opportunity. So that's how I got there. A little bit about the company, and I can't say too much simply because we filed confidentially a few weeks ago for a public offering, and so I'm bound by certain securities laws. But what I can say is, we're one of the largest video game companies in the West, mobile video game companies. I mentioned some of our competitors are companies like King, which operate Candy Crush, if that helps, you guys get a sense of the types of products we make. We were ranked as the number 3rd best internet company to work for in Israel behind Google and Facebook, but ahead of Amazon and PayPal. So that was a huge accomplishment for us. And this past year, we started sponsoring the Maccabi Tel Aviv basketball team. So now, our logo is all over their jerseys. Everyone in the country knows us. And it's a pretty large business. We have about 3,600 employees around the world. We have 18 offices in about 16 different countries. So it really is a large global business. And as Rabbi alluded to, my role there is I'm in charge of the corporate development function. So we could just mute until the Q&A. So I run the corporate development function, which basically requires or has me work on four different buckets. One is M&A, so buying companies, and that's where I'm most active. The second is capital markets transactions, which is basically, raising debt or selling equity, and that's where I'm most active after M&A. And then there's just corporate strategy and investments as well. And I'm also a member of the management team. I'm the youngest member of the management team, which for me is pretty cool. It's a nice accomplishment that I'm proud of. And that's a little bit about myself and Playtika. So now I'll talk a little bit about what it's like to live and do business in Israel. And I'm going to give you my candid perspective, at least, not the Israeli bonds, everything is peachy perspective. And when I say Israel, just to sort of caveat this, I really mean Tel Aviv. So that shouldn't be taken out of context. I live in Tel Aviv. I work in Herzliya Pituach. And short of those two cities, I do not move. Maybe once or twice a year, I go to Jerusalem. But other than that, I stay in Tel Aviv. So, life in Tel Aviv is not easy, but it could be very fulfilling and very entertaining. And I would say, unlike in Canada, it's not a comfortable life. Salaries relative to the cost of living are disproportionately lower. It's a very expensive city, and the average living conditions are not good. They're definitely not what we would be used to in the West. So I'm talking a regular apartment in a regular neighborhood. You have no space. It's not clean. There's all sorts of problems, but that's sort of the look and feel and charm of Israel. Now, on the positive side, it has amazing weather. The food is the best in the world. And there really isn't another city that I've been to that has even a comparable vibe and energy. And it's difficult to explain without being there and feeling it for yourself. But there really is something about the energy there that's different. One of the things that I really like is that, there's such a hustle in Tel Aviv. Everyone there is trying to make a shekel. Everyone has a side gig that they're trying to make money out of. And Tel Aviv is really, it's a very capitalistic place. It's sort of like this high octane train of capitalism that just isn't stopping. You can either get on the train and see where it takes you, or you can watch it pass you by. But that train is going, and the decision's up to you. And I like that. I find that super, super attractive. Now, one thing that I wasn't really aware of before I moved there, and I think is very unique about Israel, is so obviously Israel is a great place to be if you're interested in tech and you're a developer. But what's very unique is that it's a very good way to start your career in tech without having any experience or knowing anything about tech, which is kind of a weird thing to say. But the truth is, if you want to work at a major tech company in Silicon Valley, it's nearly impossible for Canadians, at least, right? You have to first get past all the visa issues, which are not trivial. And then the competition is incredibly fierce, right? Every top MBA from the best programs, they don't want to work at hedge funds anymore. They want to work in tech. They want to work for Amazon. They want to work for Apple, for Uber, et cetera. And so you have to get over the visa issues, and then you have to compete with the best talent. Whereas in Israel, their tech scene just needs English speakers to work in enterprise sales roles. I'm not talking about developers and R&D people. So literally, if you're Jewish, you speak English, and you're willing to sacrifice on compensation a bit, you will get hired at one of these large tech companies. And at that point, you have your foot in the door. So it's up to you to leverage that and parlay it into something more. But that's something that you really can't get anywhere else. The second thing that I would highlight is it's a great place to start a business if you're going to work in tech or have an online business. The quality of talent is incredibly high. It's among the best in the world. And it actually comes at a fraction of the cost. It really isn't expensive. Some roles are expensive, but on the whole of it, it's not super expensive to hire people there. And the branding that comes with being an Israeli company, or an Israeli tech company, I should say, is amazing. It's real validation. On the flip side, however, your competition again is fierce for hiring. So if you work in tech, whether you're a small startup with 10 employees or you're a giant, you are competing against Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, PayPal, you name it, for talent. And so that's one thing to consider, but that comes with the territory, right? You can't have the best talent, but no competition. Some other things I thought that may be interesting to outline were some of the differences versus life and business in Canada. So I mentioned earlier that it's a much less comfortable lifestyle than Canada, but that doesn't mean it's a worse lifestyle. And that took me a few years to actually fully understand. In terms of the people, I would say they're much less obedient. So, Canadians are a lot more accepting. We don't challenge authority as much. We're very compliant and do as we're told. And Israelis are the complete opposite. And then in terms of, just accomplishing goals, they don't care about the process. It's just get it done, hack away at it, don't worry about the process. And that ultimately breeds a lot more innovation. Whereas in the West, I won't say Canada specifically, but in the West, there's something to be said for process and doing it cleanly and neatly in the right way. And they sort of throw that out the window. Another thing that I think is interesting is how homogenous Israel is, especially coming from Canada and Montreal. So of course you have a lot of Jews from Russia, from France, from, you have Sephardics, Ashkenazis, you have a lot of South Americans, but the reality is they're all kind of the same in some respects. And so Israelis aren't actually as worldly as, North Americans are. They don't really understand how things work outside of the country. And it's kind of funny sometimes to be with them outside of the country and to see that interaction with non-Israelis. And then the last thing I would say is, Israelis communicate much more directly. And I think a lot of people know that. I think the point I want to highlight is that direct communication, it drives a lot more efficiency and much better decision making. There's no political correctness. There's no dancing around the issues. You say what you say, you say what you feel, you hash it out, and you move on. And I think the best example of that is Intel, which is actually the largest employer there, multinational employer. They have a huge presence in Haifa. They actually have an orientation seminar with a PowerPoint and a lecturer, everything, that teaches their American employees what it's like to be in a meeting in Israel. Because of their presence in Israel, they have so many Americans coming over all the time, and they didn't know what to do when Israelis started yelling at each other and fighting with each other in a meeting. And so they actually had to teach them, what the norms are there. And then moving on to some of my views around the diaspora and Judaism and Israel and all of that. I would say that I've become, this is going to sound weird, but I've become less Jewish and more Israeli, or that the temptation to become less Jewish and more Israeli is stronger. And so, my parents and the values that I was raised with are what encourage me or propel me to go to synagogue, to celebrate the Chagim. I find living in Tel Aviv, at least, makes it easy to use living in Israel as a substitute for doing traditional Jewish things like going to synagogue and Shabbat and celebrating Shabbat and all of that. Living in the diaspora, you aren't as easily connected to Judaism and Israel and Hebrew in your everyday life. And so you have to make the effort to seek out those types of experiences that will connect you to Judaism and Israel. And that made me realize how important your community is in instilling certain values or, encouraging or pressuring certain behavior. The other thing that I didn't really appreciate enough is how dependent Israel is on the diaspora beyond just funding. So I always thought it was just sort of, the diaspora is useful for money. And I think they actually it plays a much more important role than that. The way I'll explain it is Israelis operate the country, right? They defend it physically. They run the day-to-day, not necessarily well, but this is what they do. The diaspora defends it from things that it doesn't have the luxury to focus on, but that are still critically important. So, defending it from anti-Semitism, from BDS movements, from claims of apartheid. It's not enough to just give money and then let the Israeli operators do what you want with it. They really don't have the luxury. They also don't have the skill set to fight back against those types of claims. And so that's something that I didn't really appreciate. And I feel that without the diaspora's influence in those aspects, again, beyond money, Israel would be weaker on a global basis. And the last thing I'll say here before turning it over to Q&A is um, I always knew this because I was told it, but I didn't really appreciate it, at least firsthand, the unifying effect of Jewish values. So Israelis and the Western diaspora could not be more different culturally. And I really mean that. But they share the same values. And I find that such a testament to what makes Jewish culture or Jewish tradition so exceptional, that across centuries, across geographies, across cultures, so much difference can still be united by these shared values. And there really isn't another culture or religion, in my view, that has that same tolerance and unifying effect. And so, those are my prepared remarks. I hope it was interesting and a little bit entertaining. And if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address them.
So Eric, I wanted to first of all thank you for your very thoughtful reflections. And in a moment, we're going to start taking questions. People can put up their hand emojis or just do this for a question so we can stay muted and not have interference, and everyone will get a chance to ask questions. But there was one thing that we talked about coming into this high holidays that I spoke about and asked you about that maybe you might want to share if you're allowed to. Otherwise, if you have to kill us all because of issues of secrecy, then we'll just leave it as a secret. But there was a certain Tikkun Olam project that I was very moved by during the pandemic that you and your company were involved in. Are you allowed to tell us about that in terms of
Yeah.
that
So
act?
what the rabbi is referring to is our company is very active in supporting local charities and communities, both in Israel and in the other locations we operate, whether that's in Ukraine, Romania, Belarus. So I don't have the numbers offhand. It's several $1 million that we contribute to youth at risk, Holocaust survivors, just underprivileged families. And it's something that we actually take very seriously. And ironically, or I shouldn't say ironically, what I mean is it's obviously a good thing to do to be charitable, but it actually also is very good for business as well because your employees really appreciate it. That's actually something that doesn't go unnoticed. They feel prouder to be part of a company that has that kind of social impact.
Wonderful, thank you. So other questions, if people can raise their hands and then unmute, we're happy to. Okay,
Eric,
Steve,
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead, Andy.
Eric, are you listed on any stock exchange or is this a privately held company?
Today it's privately held.
So that's that. Okay. Thanks. Steve, you said Steve, he's muted.
Okay, Steve, you have to unmute if you want to ask your question. Anybody else?
Asher.
Reverend Tannenbaum had a question.
Hi, Eric. How you doing?
Good. How are you, Asher?
I'm great. So my question is, you're a former baseball player for the Sharzine Lions. Do you have any aspirations to play for Team Israel in the Olympics?
I don't. Those guys are actually much better baseball players than I am. I had a good friend who was on the team, and I really feel for him because he moved to Israel. They were doing all the training, and then COVID basically shut down their Olympic dreams. And none of these guys are getting back to the Olympics without this miracle that they had in that tournament. So it's kind of an unfortunate situation. Now he's back in the States playing minor league ball.
Right.
Steve has a question, which was, how was the language barrier for you? Can you live in Tel Aviv and just speak Hebrew, or do you need other languages, like you said, the Anglophone factor?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the language barrier is, how would I describe it? If you live in Tel Aviv, you'll be fine if you speak English in terms of navigating. You're not going to have any issue. But if you want to live in Tel Aviv, be part of the culture, be part of the social fabric, you need to learn Hebrew. There's things that can only be said in Hebrew in a certain tone that are important for sort of establishing yourself in a conversation. So you're not going to have any trouble getting a taxi or ordering food or anything like that, but you won't really feel like you're part of the city if you don't speak Hebrew.
We have a question from Gregory.
Hey Eric, what's up? I was actually in Israel, I think 2 summers ago now, when Ryan interned at Playtika for the summer. I guess you were there with him as well. I'm good friends with him. But anyways, I wanted to ask you about your portfolio of games. Like, are you guys into any Roblox or Minecraft game building, or are you strictly mobile apps?
No, so we're not like Minecraft or Roblox, just for the benefit of the other viewers. So Roblox and Minecraft are sort of these games where you build your own world online, and you have friends in these worlds that you build. You could chat and hang out and, you know, do missions together. Our games are much more simplistic. So our games are like Match 3, which is Candy Crush style. They have slots games, poker games, bingo games, solitaire games. Um, not the stuff that Minecraft or Roblox do.
Okay. And I know you guys started, I think in 2018, that $400 million investment fund that you're running to acquire new companies, right? So are you, I know it said online, like you're into e-commerce and different types of businesses, like are different types of games something that you guys are open to acquiring, or like, for example, like Roblox or Minecraft servers, or, I mean, you already do Facebook games, but there's now, I don't know, a bunch of different cloud gaming platforms that people are making games for. Is that something that you guys are looking at studios for and stuff like that?
So it depends. I think what motivates the, our M&A strategy more than anything is underpinned on buying evergreen games. And what we mean by that is games that can last 20, 30, 40 years. And these are games that were already popular offline for many years. And we know that they're going to be popular online for many years. So if you think about the categories I just mentioned, solitaire, slots, bingo, poker. We didn't reinvent the wheel with any of these games. These, slots has been played since the 1800s. So those are the types of games that we look to buy. And then what we do is we're superior marketers, monetizers, product people. Our data analytics capabilities are very advanced. And so we don't want to take risk on the product. We rather buy a proven product that has a decent sized audience, but then we'll do all the things that are needed to make the game make more money. So something like Roblox, obviously there's 30 million people who use it every day. So now it's proven, but at the time, we wouldn't take that risk. And yes, we will lose out on some big opportunities, but we'll also protect our downside a lot more as a result.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Thanks, Gregory. We have a question, another one from Steve, and then I had a question that builds on what Gregory was asking, just in terms of you're not taking risks, which I understand, and it's all about monetizing the investments. But given that you're an Israeli company, has there been any thought or talk of producing gaming content that promotes those shared values that you spoke about in terms of Judaism or Zionism? Because it's an incredibly effective way to embed messages within the brains of all your players. I'm just curious if there's been any thought to doing that, whether it's about Hebrew language, Zionism, or Judaism.
Not really. Those types of values permeate more through just the work culture, but not our products.
Okay. Stephen had a question here, which is going to segue into the great program that Cantor Stotland has coming up with the new chief rabbi of the United Emirates, which he'll talk about maybe at the end to give a plug. But Stephen wants to know, are you exploring any business opportunities now in the Emirates or Bahrain? Is there any sense in the population there, not the government position, that the peace accords will hold over the long term?
Yeah, so it's something that we started to explore, but we really haven't figured out what that means. Obviously, we do have Arab customers, Arabic-speaking users, and being able to, give them a more attention is attractive. But we don't know what that looks like. We don't know if that's an office of 10 people localizing our product, if it's opening an R&D center there. So it's still very preliminary. But our view is that the peace accord will be long lasting.
Tammy had a question. She says, you said you have no family in Israel officially. How did you get comfortable living in Israel? How did you make friends?
So that's a good question. It was not easy, to be frank. It took a lot of time before I started to feel comfortable there, and it was very difficult. Most of my friends I made through work, But for me, it's a little different because I'm in a role where I work with people who are older than me. So my closest friends, like real friends that you would confide in, are actually older and have kids. So we don't actually socialize as much as I would because we're just at different stages in our life. But those are my best friends. And then there's just, a crew of people that you socialize with that are younger in Tel Aviv. You have a lot of international people who are in the same boat. You constantly have people who've just moved there and are looking to make friends. A lot of crazy people from the States end up going to Israel thinking it's going to calm them down, but it just actually makes them even crazier because it's not a normal place to live. So you just meet sort of people going out and whatnot.
Well, we were just talking about this in our Psalms class today, that there's a special ward in the Hadassah Ein Kerem Hospital for Jerusalem syndrome. Is there a special ward in one of the Tel Aviv hospitals for Tel Aviv syndrome?
I don't know. I've been fortunate to not have to end up in that ward. But Tel Aviv is a crazy place. No two ways about it.
Excellent. All right. Other questions from folks before we conclude today? 1 second, Steve. I want to make sure someone else, if they had a question, wants to ask. And if not, then we'll go.
Sydney Margulies.
Sydney, is he there? I think he's on the phone.
Yeah, Sydney, unmute.
Yeah, he's on another call. He's on another call. Okay, so Steve, and then the Cantor will do a plug for his program with the Rabbi from the Emirates. Steve.
Hi, Eric. How are you? It's Steve Tobin.
How you doing?
How's it going in Florida? Good?
Yeah, it's going well.
Maybe we'll see you at Soho Club this year. Possibly. Anyways, so I read a report last week, which was quite outstanding, that Tel Aviv is the 5th or 6th most expensive city to live in the world. How are young people coping with that, and how far do they have to go in order is there a big commute now to Tel Aviv from cities like Beersheba or other cities to work in Tel Aviv because of the rising costs of the lifestyle in Tel Aviv?
Yeah, so I saw that report as well. For those who didn't, it's kind of shocking actually that Tel Aviv's ranked, more expensive than places like London and others. So first off, banks are much more lenient with debt there. I'm not in that situation, so I can't attest to it firsthand, but everyone's in debt. Truthfully, everyone is in debt. You need it to fund your lifestyle. Secondly, like I said, it's kind of like living in New York when you're a young kid out of college. You're much more willing to sacrifice on the quality of your apartment just to be in the city. And so people don't necessarily care as much. But I don't really know how people do it, to be honest, because it's so expensive and it's in all aspects of life. Like, I lived in New York for a summer, and granted it was just a summer, but New York's very expensive real estate wise. You're not going to get a cheap apartment, but you don't have to eat for that expensive. You don't have to entertain yourself that expensively. And in Tel Aviv, that's not the case. All of those things are expensive. So it's kind of frustrating, I guess, for these people that employers, don't pay more. But the problem is, I know I'm not providing clarity on how they do it because I really don't know. But the problem is I don't see how this ever gets better, because what actually drives this are two things. One, it's the success of the startup community itself, which is what Israel has been trying to encourage. So you still have people exiting their companies every single day for tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. And in most cases, these people are choosing to live in Tel Aviv. So they're driving up the cost of living there. And also you have wealthy Jews from all over the world coming to Israel. You have wealthy South Africans, wealthy French people, wealthy Americans, wealthy Brits. And in some cases, they're just using it as vacation homes. In some cases, they're permanently moving there. Like in the cases of most French people, it's not a good place to be right now. And they're coming from different places where they have a lot more money, and it's boxing people out. So I don't know if it will get to the point where there's any like real civil unrest. I don't want to be, too dramatic in that sense. But I know that if I were a native Israeli and I could no longer afford to live in Tel Aviv because the French and the South Africans and the Americans are coming here, buying up all the property and spending 2 months a year or coming for Pesach, I feel like that would at least create some kind of mobilization. But I don't think we're at that point yet.
Okay, so the most important question, and then I'll turn it over to the cantor to do a plug on our upcoming conversation. The most important burning question right now, of course, is how much do you owe your success to your favorite middle brother?
A lot, a lot. I don't know how to
Okay.
quantify.
Well, we may invite the renowned middle brother David to come for a Maven monologue in 2021. So stay tuned for more details. We also have a couple other Maven monologues in 2021 being scheduled, including some that may include talk talks from the experts, one expert on cyber terrorism, as well as possibly on vaccines, because it's going to be on people's minds in terms of advances in biotech and in relationship to Israel and vaccine production. So those are things for 2021 that we're still in the process of planning, and we hope to give you more information about that. So stay tuned on the Thursday newsletter. And Cantor Stotland has a great surprise for us about an old friend from TBDJ who now happens to be the chief rabbi of the United Emirates.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Eric, thank you so much for your words. You're so unbelievably well spoken. And it's been so inspiring to hear about your, journey. I haven't seen you in a while, perhaps since you were socking, grand slams out of the park for the Shoal softball team. And so nice to see everybody else. Also, I hope you're all having an awesome day. And I also want to invite everyone on December 8th, which is a Tuesday at noon. So it's the same time, different station though. It'll be on the Shar Zion Minyan link, where we will hear from another Montrealer, Rabbi Yehuda Sarna, who grew up in Hampstead. He's a year younger than me. It would make him 42. Is the chaplain at NYU College, and in 2019 was appointed chief rabbi of the United Arab Emirates. And we will hear about how he was appointed and what he's working on, and all the unbelievably exciting things that are developing in terms of Israel international relations, Jewish international relations, and perhaps doors opening to countries that we hope will open and will continue to open. And so that is certain to be another unbelievable lunchtime gathering, and we will hear from him again, Rabbi Sarna, Tuesday the 8th at noon.
And I've just posted the Zoom link for those to put into your calendar right now. I wanted to also once again thank Eric for the generosity of your time and your spirit and your inspiration. We have to also say thanks to your parents and of course to your Bubby, Janice, who is shepping Super Nachas behind Stephen over there. So everybody is rejoicing in your accomplishments for not only for Shar Zion, but also for the Jewish people, for Israel, and for the world. May you continue to be blessed in all of your amazing work and continue to be a difference maker. And maybe in the next version of Startup Nation, your story will be on the first page. Thanks again, everybody, for joining us. Stay safe and stay sound. All of our blessings. Take care. Thanks to Eric.